Hello, and thank you for joining us for our webinar, Scientific Collaboration Checklist. Get on top of your scientific collaboration. Presented by Tom Van Dalen, Senior Product Director for Science Cloud at the System BIOVIA. Before we begin, I'd like to note that today's presentation will be followed by a Q&A session. Attendee phone lines are muted, so if you have any questions during the webinar, please submit them via the chat or Q&A panels located on the right-hand side of your screen. Questions will be addressed at the end of today's session. And now I'd like to turn the webinar over to Tom to begin today's presentation.
Thank you, Mike. So today I'll take you through a number of external collaboration challenges that we have seen with our customers. I'll talk about some of the tools that we have been developing at BIOVIA to address those challenges. And then I'll take you to a fairly extensive pharma use case that uses a number of those tools to address those challenges and to support them in their external collaboration efforts. I'll talk a little bit about how we make sure that your data is secure in our solution, which we store in the cloud, in Science Cloud. And then I'll conclude by listing a number of success factors, a number of criteria that we have seen over and over again are important with our customers to make sure that their external collaboration is working effectively. So I'd like to start with a poll, a quick question for the audience to get us going. And the question is, how many external collaborations are you involved in? Include any academic collaborations, pharma biotech collaborations, outsourcing relationships with CROs, CMOs, or any nonprofit research initiatives. And there's 5 different answers here. It could be 0, 1 and 2, between 3 and 5, between 6 and 10, and over 11. So if you can type in your answer there, we'll give it another 5 seconds or so, and then we'll show you the result. Okay, I think we're there. And let's show the result. So that is quite typical. So most people have over at least 6 collaborations, and 38% of the audience has over 11 different collaborations. And that is very much in line with what we are seeing. We're seeing our customers collaborate with an average of 10 or more collaborations, and this is a survey that we conducted a couple of weeks ago. They're collaborating with academic institutions as part of consortia. They're doing a lot of external research, and they're doing a lot of work with CROs and CMOs. And interestingly, they're also citing a lot of internal multi-site collaboration. And those could be collaborations with different groups that might be within different sites of a company. It might span across a country, or might span across different continents even. And those can also be quite challenging to conduct effectively. So that's also an area where we see our technology Science Cloud apply. That brings us to our second poll. And the question here is, which secure systems do you have in place to support external collaboration? Do you have secure email to share data with your collaborators or outsourcing partners? Do you use a tool like SharePoint or other Microsoft collaboration tools? Do you use SharePoint Box or some similar tool? Or do you have a purpose-built secure scientific data sharing platform? Or last option, there's really no secure solution in place. Perhaps it's email, but not necessarily a secure form of email. So we'll give that some time. And let's see what the results are. Okay, so this is also kind of as expected. So the primary tools for collaboration are either email or SharePoint, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So email is not necessarily a secure solution, how the data is transferred and so on, but it just happens to be the primary solution in place for people to share scientific data. And this is typically what we've seen, and the question was asked a little bit differently, but this is about a secure email solution. That was a small number. Most people actually responded that there was no solution in place, dedicated solution for external collaboration, and then a number cited a mix of tools like Dropbox and SharePoint. And our conclusion was here that there was a significant opportunity, that there was no dedicated solution in place for supporting external collaboration. And I'll talk a little bit about what we mean by dedicated solution, what these solutions can offer in addition to these tools that you might be using today. So we see as one of the main drivers that take people to the cloud to support collaboration, that is the main driver to support external collaboration, but we see a number of issues with that. It is safe to say, and we saw it in the first poll, that over 50% of research IT budgets are now spent externally. Yet what we also see is that while IT is mandated to put a solution in place, they're often applying traditional internal solutions to an external problem. So we saw that in the poll quite clearly, so solutions like SharePoint and Dropbox. The problem with that is that the security is not always guaranteed, and even more importantly, that those tools don't have the scientific knowledge to make sure that the data that you share with collaborators is actually valid. So SharePoint will not tell you that a set of compounds that you post for someone to pick up is actually correct or is meeting your business rules. As a result, what we see is that it can take a long time for collaborations to get started, and we see scientists spend a lot of time processing data, making sure data is in the right format, making sure that data is conforming to business rules. This can take up to 2 days of a scientist's time, which is time not spent in actually analyzing the data and making decisions. And based on this, from another survey, we've learned that an estimated 60 to 70% of collaborative partnerships actually fail to deliver their intended outcome. So they don't outright fail, but they either don't meet any timelines that were set up front. They're not meeting the scientific objectives of the study, and the reason is often either poor communication, unclear roles or responsibilities, and inconsistencies in the way that data is reported. One other thing that we've been seeing is that starting up or closing down projects can take a long time. You and the partner need to agree on an IT solution, and for every partner there might be different requirements and different infrastructure needs to be put in place. And as a result, if it takes a couple of months for a collaboration to get started, the initial goals of the collaboration, drivers of the collaboration might have changed. So those are the issues with supporting external collaborations. Another driver to go to the cloud, and this is also something that we support with Science Cloud, is for companies to simply lower their TCO. And we had a couple customers recently that were in need of notebook solutions and inventory solutions. And the quickest way for them to get up and running was to adopt a cloud SaaS solution. So they didn't have to hire IT people, they didn't have to buy software licenses for Oracle and other supporting tools, and they didn't want to have to purchase any hardware. So this was a very quick way for them to get started. A third driver to the cloud is something that we see with smaller companies typically, and increasingly sort of medium-sized pharma companies, and that is the mindset that really everything that they want to do, the first approach, will be the cloud. This gives them incredible agility. It makes it very easy to start up and build up an infrastructure. It also gives you a lot of flexibility to change your infrastructure as your research goals evolve. So we see more and more companies take a cloud-first approach to IT. So these are some other drivers that take our customers to the cloud. For the remainder of the presentation, I want to focus on collaboration. And when you think about collaboration, although projects can come in many different flavors, we typically see projects go to a number of common phases. So the project needs to spin up, a legal framework needs to be put in place, accounts need to be provisioned. There's a certain amount of implementation that needs to happen up front. Some custom rules need to be defined, especially if this is the first collaboration to set up. Tech transfer procedures need to be put in place depending on different types of data sets that you need to deal with. Data sources might have to be integrated. But once the collaboration is up and running, you typically go through this cycle where you capture the IP for any scientific experiments that are conducted, which is a very important step to make sure that later on where the IP originated. Data needs to be loaded, data needs to be cleaned, data needs to be analyzed. Finally, data needs to be reported, needs to be shared with the rest of the project team, with management perhaps, and all the while you need to make sure that communication is done effectively with everybody involved in the project. And this is not trivial if those people are in other companies, if those people are in other parts of the world, speak different languages, and have different cultures. At some point then the project ends and the project needs to be closed out. At that point, and this is a very important step, access needs to be, users need to be removed from the system as required by the legal framework for your project. Data needs to be either exported, archived, or in some cases disposed. And if your data is in a single place, then that is something that is really easy to do. But we have heard of situations that the legal requirement was to remove all the data from everybody's machines within 2 weeks. And this is something that that customer wasn't able to do because the data was all over the place. So this is a way to think about a project lifecycle that with the proper technology you can manage effectively and do it over and over again for any new collaboration that you take on. So let's talk about our technology that we provide to our customers to support external collaborations. That is called Science Cloud. Science Cloud is a place in the cloud where you can share data, structured data, chemistry, biology, safety data, and where you can share documents with your partner network. You're creating secure collaboration spaces, and any data that you put there can only be seen by you and the people that you work with. If you start new collaborations, you create new projects to share data with those with that new partner or those new partners. On top of that data sharing platform, we have built a number of applications because we see customers use those applications in the cloud with their collaborators to analyze the data, to do things like inventory and so on. So the tools that we have deal with storing and querying of data, and that's both structured data and documents. There is a notebook in Science Cloud for capturing the experiment IP. There's a place to register scientific data, things like chemistry and biologics. There is an assay tool to take screening data and process that, QA that, do IC50s and whatnot, and then publish that data into a central place. And then there is an inventory system to keep track of chemical inventory, biologics inventory that's used within collaborations. Other tools are enabling those applications, and the main one is Python Pilot. Science Cloud is built on a Python Pilot foundation. Python Pilot is used to implement your own business rules. It's used to extend applications, to build custom services, and it's a very important tool to do integration between data in the cloud and on-prem resources, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. We have a tool called the Protocol Exchange. This is a way to take those Python Pilot services and share those with the community. We have an analysis tool, which is a graphical visualization analysis program for analyzing scientific data and making decisions. Python Pilot protocols can be deployed to other users using web tasks. And then all of these things that I've been talking about, checking up on your collaborations and deploying tasks, can be done on mobile devices. And that's quite an important part of our strategy here. We see a lot of people that collaborate, for example, with partners that might be in other time zones, quickly check up on their collaborations, give people some feedback just through a mobile device. You might be at home, you might be on the train. It's a really quick way to be on top of your collaborations and to keep things moving along. So I'll take you through a use case that we have implemented with a number of pharma companies. And the use case is between a pharma and two CROs. So we have a chemistry CRO and we have a screening CRO. And while they're collaborating, they're using a number of applications within Science Cloud. They're using projects for storing data. They're using Notebook for IP capture, and they're using analysis and assay. So here's the workflow. The pharma company needs a number of compounds synthesized by a CRO, and to initiate that, they provide a request as a Notebook experiment. This chemistry CRO takes that experiment template, they create a new experiment, they do their synthesis and document that. At that point, the experiment gets signed by the pharma company, the sponsoring company. Once that is signed and approved, the compounds are synthesized into Science Cloud projects, which is a structured repository for chemistry and biology. The next step then is to request a screening campaign with a second partner. That partner runs the assay, does the QA, and publishes the results. Those results are reviewed, and once approved, they're published again into the Science Cloud project's structured database, and then the analysis takes place. So they're looking at the chemistry, they're looking at the biology, and they start to make some decisions on next steps. So I'll take you through this. I'm not going to do a live demo, but I have a number of screenshots that hopefully give you a good impression of the workflow and how pharma companies go about this with their partners. So just to keep track of the different parties, we have a chemist here on the left. That's Thomas. That's the guy that works at the pharma company. And then we have Linda. That is the lady that works at on the CRO side. So this is how you can hopefully tell the different parties apart. So it starts with Thomas creating the experiment in Notebook. This is the type of compound in the series around it that he would like to see synthesized. So he sketches that in Notebook. He provides some other information. He says, I want this amount of that material. I want a certain purity. I expect this to be a simple synthesis, a simple one-step synthesis. And that, it's really should be all the information that the CRO now needs just to get to work. So over to, and then he makes the request. So there is and it's a very important concept in Science Cloud, there is a social portal where you can provide information, you can make requests. So here, Thomas says, please look at this request and synthesize this compound. So with that, it goes over to Linda. Linda picks up that request. She picks up the Notebook template, and she goes to work. She creates a new experiment in the Notebook. She relates that to that experiment template from the sponsoring company. She calls it the synthesis of a simple amide, and she documents the experiment. She sketches the reaction in a sketcher of choice, and she provides a description of the experiment. We kept that pretty simple here, but that could be a fairly lengthy description of how the experiment was done, how the synthesis was done. An important result of the synthesis is, of course, the analytics. So that might be NMR, that might be other analytical results that could be associated with the experiment. That might be chromatography, it might be many different things. They can be associated with that experiment. And one other asset that she associated with the experiment is a description of the synthesis steps. And this happens to be a scientific paper. She can get quick feedback from Thomas here. Linda says, okay, I'll take care of this. What do you think of this method? I've used this before. There is a link to the document. Thomas reviews that document and he says, well, this sounds like the right approach to take, and Linda goes to work and finishes the experiment. So let's say Thomas approves here. Now the next step then would be to take that new chemistry and to store that in a structured way, and also making sure that it meets the business rules that Thomas at his pharma company needs to apply, just to make sure it's standardized compared to all the chemistry that he is handling. So within the Notebook, Linda clicks on Register to Project Data. This launches a form. It takes all the information from the experiment. It takes the compound that she synthesized. She fills in some other information to properly track this compound or series of compounds, and it takes the analytical from the experiment. That generates a notification. It says, I updated the chemistry, I created one batch, and if you click on the details, this is what Thomas can do. He can inspect that chemistry, make sure that all the information is there. He can inspect the analytical one more time, just to make sure that this compound is indeed the compound he was looking for, and to make sure that the purity is there. This is where it ends for this first chemistry CRO. There's other things that Thomas can do to stay on top of his project. So in this case, let's say this is project 27, he can now look over time about any chemistry that has happened, the number of compounds that were synthesized, and also the different screens that were done, the different types of screens. So this is a quick way to get a complete overview of the project with all the people that you work with and all the documents that are shared. So quickly back to the workflow. So we've done the chemistry, and now we're going to do the screening, and we're going to work with this screening CRO. Also happens to be called Linda, but this could be a completely different company that you work with in this same project. And so this Linda has taken these samples now, and now her job is to do the screening. She goes to her lab, she performs the screens, and at the end of that, she will produce a lot of raw data. That raw data can be loaded into Science Cloud Assay, which is the assay facility within Science Cloud. And a very important step is to do the QC. So she will look at the different plates, she will look at different averages, she will look at different analyses like Z-scores. She can look at the values on all of the plates, all of the values. She can look at heat maps. And there's other ways just to do much more detailed analyses here. Once she confirms that that data is correct, she can go to the next step, and if this is a secondary screen, it could be an IC50, it could be curve fitting, and an important part of that is that if the data is clean and if the compounds are active, the fit is done automatically and you get your answers, you get your IC50s, but sometimes curves might have to be rescued, and there is the ability to knock out some data points by selecting data points by providing parameters for the dose response fit, just to make sure that these curves actually fit, and curves like this can then often be rescued. So once you've done all those curve fits and saved the ones that were actually quite clean, you're doing your curve fits, you get your parameters, you get in your IC50s, and at that point, this is a very important last step. That data can then also be published into Science Cloud projects, and this is then again the repository where you now have your chemistry data together with your biology data. So this then goes back to Thomas, and she can, it will actually trigger a notification again that this biology data now is also in his project. This is a summary where we see the biology together with the chemistry, and Thomas can now analyze that further. And what Thomas does in this case is he opens up that data into the analysis application. So he takes all of the chemistry, all of the biology into Science Cloud Analysis, and there's two parts to Science Cloud Analysis. This is the pipelining part, where you take your data from a project and you can apply some other steps to that data. So you can compute, in this case, some ADME models and TopCat models, and we're going to look at activity and compare that to its ADME properties and compare that to any toxicity predictions that we've done with these computational tools. So what does he see when he does that? These are the types of analysis he can do quickly within Science Cloud Analysis. He can look at the percent inhibition distribution. So these are percentages. He can look at two different types of inhibition. He can look at predicted values for toxicity and see that spectrum here. Or he can also look at biodegradability, solubility, and blood-brain barrier properties of these compounds. So this is a quick way to look at all of the different characteristics of this data set, and then you can go into any type of different analysis. So this will be a Trellis plot where he's looking at percent inhibition as a function of biodegradability, and the different classifications here are the blood-brain barrier levels for the different compounds. So let's say you might be interested in high values for the blood-brain barrier properties. but low scores for the biodegradability, and this is a logarithmic scale. So these might be compounds that he would like to investigate further with high percent inhibition, high blood-brain barrier properties, high biodegradability. Another type of analysis might be to look at molecular properties, might look at molecular weight, A log P, and then look at the highly active, high values for inhibition. And this way he can zoom in on compounds that might have, say, low A log P, low molecular weight, yet show activity in the screen as conducted by that CRO. So at this point, the study is done. Thomas has made his conclusions. He selected compounds that he would like to take further. All the while, they've been communicating through the social portal, and that's an important part, that you have effective communication with your partners. And those partners might work in, as I said, in different time zones, might work different times of the day. So to have a track record of all of these conversations is very valuable. Okay, so this is the use case that we have discussed, and I want to highlight one more aspect of this, as has proven to be very important with a number of our customers. And this is that the data that is being shared with their partners, oftentimes there's a requirement to feed that back into the organization. And the reason is that there are a lot of scientists on site that are using a specific set of tools, specific set of applications, and are interacting with a number of databases that are on-prem. And a very important step then turns to be to do that synchronization. So as soon as the chemistry is uploaded, as soon as the screening data is uploaded, that data is synchronized with an on-prem notebook, with an on-prem small molecule repository, or with an on-prem screening system. And we have also worked with customers that have actually taken the notebook experiments that were created by their CROs and have also synchronized those with an on-prem notebook. And the great thing about this then is that for these users, nothing will really change. But now, through that infrastructure, they have access to all of that screening, of all of that collaboration data from their whole partner network. So just to wrap it up, I do want to say something about security. This is, as you can understand, a very important requirement. You're trusting us with your data, and there is a number of things that we do with our provider to make sure that your data is secure. This relates to physical security, this relates to network security, this relates to encryption, this is application security, to make sure that the proper authentication is there. It also makes sure that we adhere to a secure development lifecycle methodology, and our development team gets regular training in security practices, and they follow certain strict practices just to make sure that the way that they develop code complies with security standards. And then finally, there's personnel security. There's very specific roles within the team. There's very specific roles within our provider about what certain people can do, what certain people can see, and it's very restricted. Who can actually access the data? Who can actually access information about users? Based on all of this, we obtained ISO certification last year, ISO 27001. This was a really big deal. We are the only vendor in our space that has this security clearance, and this is a testament to the level that we take care of security within Science Cloud. So just to wrap it up, We talked about a checklist. I'm going to phrase it in terms of success factors. I think what's really key is for a pharma company, a biotech company working with partners, is to improve the time to value for new partners. So think about the time it takes for you to get a new partner started, for you to get a new project started. It's important that it happens quickly, that it gets set up quickly so you can do your work and you can wrap up the project and move on to the next project. So think about how long that takes you today and how long you would really want it to take to make that project successful and make it as successful as you would be, as if you would be running an internal project. I think it's important that companies strive to decrease their dependency on imperfect tools like email and Excel. Email is often not secure, although we'd like to believe that, and very valuable data gets passed through email. And Excel is often the tool of choice for data handling and also communication. And we all, I think, are familiar with the challenges that brings. I think what's important also is that you streamline workflows between multiple systems. You have systems, as we've seen, to document your experiments, to analyze screening data, to manage your chemistry. And what's very important for productivity is to make sure that those workflows are efficient and streamlined. And then lastly, and we didn't talk about that all that much, but by having your data in a single system, by managing your projects all within a single system, you can really start thinking about holistic tracking and monitoring of all of those projects and get an instant overview of where all your data is, where your projects sit, which collaborators are most productive, and so on. So I'll conclude by saying that the pharma companies that get a handle on this are going to be the successful ones. As I said before, we're all collaborating. We're not necessarily all doing this effectively. And instead of this being a real competitive advantage, collaboration is something that, if not done well, can really hold you back. So this is a very important point, I think, for everybody just to get a handle on. So that concludes it. I do want to make you aware of a webinar that we are sponsoring with IDC, a pretty, you might be familiar with, an analyst, well-known analyst, Alan Louie, is conducting this. This is next week. Please go to our website to get details and register. And then finally, I just want to open it up for questions. And if there's any more questions after this event that you have, do not hesitate to contact me or go to our website that has a lot of pertinent information, or to stay up to date, you can also join the LinkedIn group called Science Cloud. So with that, I'll hand it back to Mike, and we'll see if there's any questions.
Thanks, Ton. And to the audience out there, remember this webinar is recorded and will be sent out, so you'll be getting the links and Ton's contact information in your email. We did have a few questions come in, actually. First question was, what are different ways to acknowledge research collaborators and partners if there are too many of them for a single project, or maybe if there's a large number of them for a single project?
Yeah, so what we typically see is that, and you saw the use case where we had two partners, we could have gone about that in two ways. We could have defined either a single project where we have the pharma company, the sponsoring company, and the two CROs working in a single project, and they can see each other's data. And you can add some fine-grained security where you can say, for example, that the chemistry CRO can only, that's the only party that can update the chemistry, while the screening CRO can only update the biology. You might say they cannot even see the chemistry. that would be one way to go. If you want to have complete separation between these partners, and that is actually often the case, you can define two projects. One project with your chemistry CRO and one project with your screening CRO, and you have complete separation between anything that goes on between those partners. Yet as the pharma company, you obviously have the oversight and you can see all of those projects. So what we typically see is that bigger companies have tens or dozens of projects with different partners. They spin up new projects, they do their work, they close down projects, they start the new project. And then they have the data share that I talked about, the structured database, sits on top of that and is a data store that supports all of those projects.
Excellent. Another question that came in, what type of data standards can you support for the transfer of data from Science Cloud back to on-premise systems?
Right. So that's a good question. So as I explained, data transfer, data synchronization with on-prem systems is based on Pipeline Pilot. Every application in Science Cloud has an API, so I can get data out of Science Cloud projects. I can get documents out of Science Cloud projects by using the collection of components that encapsulate an API. Same way I can get data out of the notebook, or I can get data out of Assay. So that is one side of it. So you can get that data out of Science Cloud. To get it back into an on-prem system, it depends on the application. And we have helped customers to put data into BIOVIA Workbook. We have helped customers put data into other notebooks from other vendors. And in most cases, they expose an API that can be automated. We have also synchronized chemistry data with customers against chemistry repositories like Accord, which has an API or a direct database. So it depends on the API on the other end, but in most cases, that API is available, and then you simply have a Pipeline Pilot set of protocols that take care of the data transfer.
Perfect. Another question. How long does it take to get started with Science Cloud, and how much training is involved for new users?
I'd say there's two answers to that. For end users, people that consume the data, that look around for results, look at the chemistry and do simple analysis, we typically go to a 2-hour training course. We take them through all the aspects of the system and maybe do a refresher a couple, a month or so later after they've been trying a few things. But that's on the order of a couple of hours. The second type of user would be more of the power user, the person responsible for setting up a project, setting up a collaboration, making sure that there is infrastructure in place to make sure that chemistry conforms to business rules. So that involves some Pipeline Pilot work. For somebody with a Pipeline Pilot background, that's typically a 4-day course where we take you through all the different collections, and that is typically sufficient to get you up and started and make you productive.
Perfect. Another question. In which regions of the world is Science Cloud hosted?
Science Cloud is hosted at Amazon AWS. We have servers in the US and in Europe. The reason that it's in different places is that we have production in one place and what's called a disaster recovery instance in a different place. And that means that if Science Cloud of a one data center goes down, which is an infrequent event, but it might happen, we can quickly switch over to the other side. So for running in US, we can switch over to Europe. We also have mirrors in other places in the world, like Asia, just to make sure that that performance is adequate. I just came back from Japan actually, and I had my hands on the system there, and believe it or not, performance actually turns out to be better over there because the internet, they have a very high quality, high speed internet in the country there. So performance is turns out to be very good in many different parts of the world.
Great. Could you describe the accommodation of Science Cloud for legal e-discovery tasks?
Let me just give a brief answer if I understand the question well. For legal e-discovery tasks, I think this goes, assuming this goes back to IP protection, this is done well in Notebook. Within Notebook, you document your experiments. You're going all the way to having those experiments signed or signed twice, both by the CRO and the co-sponsoring and the sponsoring organization. And this is something that gets then locked, and it's something that you keep around potentially forever. And this gives you a clear view on what happened at what time, who did what, so that 10 years from now, if there is any kind of dispute, you can always go back to that experiment and know what happened. And I apologize if I didn't understand the question correctly. Feel free to follow up and send me an email. I can dig into this a little further.
Perfect. Does Science Cloud include a sample management tool?
It does, and it actually two parts of this. So there is an inventory tool that is based on SysPro technology that we put in the cloud. This is a way to look at your compound collection and see what is available, and to know when you need to order new compounds. That is the inventory. Then there is a sample application which is specifically built for plate-based assays and keeping track of compounds involved with plate-based assays. So that is the assay sample technology that we also have in Science Cloud.
Great. Can you tell us whether current implementations of Science Cloud are primarily being used for preclinical collaborations, and whether or not you'd consider Science Cloud valid for use in regulated use cases in later stage clinical development, for example?
Right. So that's a good question. So right now, Science Cloud is used primarily in discovery and all the way up to preclinical. Right now, Science Cloud is not used in regulated environments. This is something that we are very interested in, and we do have other cloud technology within BIOVIA that could help with that. But at this point, we haven't taken that step yet to allow you to use Science Cloud in those environments downstream. But we are interested in that, and if this is a specific interest of you, then please let us know. We'll see how we can get you there.
Great. I know that you covered this in one of the more later slides, but how can you guarantee that data is secure in Science Cloud? And this is obviously a really important topic of interest for the audience.
Yeah. Well, I have to refer to that last slide, and this is talking about everything that we do to ensure that the system is secure. And it comes down to practices. It comes down to technology. It comes down to making sure that whatever is done at the provider is done under these ISO requirements. So there's not one simple answer to this. It's just a long list of things that we do continuously It's about how we run our business. It's how we train our people. That all together ensures that your data is secure. And there was a security workshop at BioIT where this was the main topic. And I think that the conclusion after the workshop was that your data can be more secure in the cloud than it is on-prem. And we all know what the challenges are for on-prem data storage. It's actually, not very hard to breach on-prem security because you have thousands of people that are actually within your firewall. Wireless is not secure. In the cloud, you can very tightly control security, if people properly understand that and take those precautions on their end, as in addition to what we do and what our provider does, we believe that your data is more secure in the cloud than it will ever be on-prem.
You mentioned that Science Cloud is built on Pipeline Pilot. Do Science Cloud customers need a Pipeline Pilot license in order to use Science Cloud?
The way we license Science Cloud is by selling you a number of applications, and you decide what those applications are. And one of those applications is what we call an authoring application. And the authoring application allows you to build Pipeline Pilot protocols and to deploy those within Science Cloud. So it's just one of the applications that you can buy within the Science Cloud stack. Now, a lot of our people, our customers, they do have Pipeline Pilot, and they can then run that on-prem to do the data transfer back and forth to Science Cloud. So that's a very powerful thing to do. But it's not an absolute requirement that you have an on-prem license for Science Cloud, for Pipeline Pilot to work with Science Cloud.
Perfect. Looks like that's all the questions at this time. We have a question for the audience still on the line with us. If you'd like to be contacted by Ton or another BIOVIA representative regarding the information presented today, feel free to let us know here. Otherwise, I'll just remind the audience once again that the webinar has been recorded and will be available by the end of the week. Thank you, Ton, for sharing your time and expertise today. It's abundantly clear that the audience found this information very useful and informative. Thanks, everybody, for joining, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks, everybody.